بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم ألهمنا مراشد أمورنا وأعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. One of the ahadith which comes in Kitabul Fitan of many of the books of ahadith, which is regarded as in the level of judging the strength of ahadith, this is regarded as hadithun sahihun, where many in the chapter of Fitan will be like on a level of hasan or da'if. Those that are regarded as sahih, from those, this is one that has always caught the eye of many scholars of all times, especially of recent times. The reason is because nearly every sentence of the narration is like mysterious or indicating towards something which is unknown. So the wording, first we will go through it, and to understand now when explaining this narration, as I said, every part is mysterious, means scholars of all eras will always say at the ending, and only Allah will know what was really meant through this narration. And maybe at the end of time, someone will be able to write, this was intended and that was intended. Certain ulama had the view that such narrations, they should just be left until Qiyamah or until the Mahdi, or maybe Isa alayhi salam will explain it. And others said that you can take a chance, you could try to look for some explanation, but you'll have to say that only Allah knows the reality of the narration, and it will only be known at the ending how close you were to understanding the narration in its full meaning. Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhu narrates that كنا قعودا عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فذكر الفتن فأكثر في ذكرها. We were sitting with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He began mentioning about trials that the world will see. And he spoke about a lot of trials. Hatta dhakara. That is why in other narrations it's regarded as from the fitan of min akhir zaman, the last of the fitan. Some scholars would even say that after you see these three, then thumma yakhrujul Mahdi, then be ready for the Mahdi, because like this is the last, these fitan. So hatta dhakara fitnat al-ahlas, until Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned the fitna of ahlas, so that will be mentioned. Then he will discuss it for a while, and thereafter fitnatus sarra will be mentioned, that ahlas will lead to sarra. And then after sarra will become duhaima. Some narrations is dahma, but in this narration is duhaima, the small smoke. And then after that it will come, and once you find the seer, then fantazirud dajjal, then understand that from that next day, next period or the period after, then it will be the khuruj or the appearance of Dajjal. So we will explain this narration in a possible manner that we have understood it, or we are inclined towards that perhaps it meant this. Definitely many scholars might not agree with that. They will say some other, or they might just say leave it as it is until the Mahdi himself or Isa alayhi salam explains it. We also will say that our explanation, there's no way it could be said that it's proven or it's definite. It's just a perhaps, that it sits with a few things that happened in world history, few major things. And it happened in a very similar or close connection to this narration. And there are scholars who have also interpreted it in this manner. So first comes that hatta dhakara fitnat al-ahlas. Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about the fitna of hills. Hills, ahlas, refers to that if you like riding on a horse or a camel, normally you will see on the back they'll first put the first mat, and on top of that then you put the saddle. Maybe you call it the saddle mat. So this thing is the one that touches the body of the animal. This is the one that gets the most wet, because when the animal runs, and all that perspiration normally touches this one. This one sticks onto the animal. It's called hils for this reason. Some said because of its luzum, it's stuck to it. And being stuck to something means dawam, that it's going to be for a long time. Others have said it takes the meaning of like dark or hidden, because this is the hidden part. No one sees this part. They see the saddle, normally you're sitting on it, you don't ever see this part. Some said because it's there touching the animal and that perspiration, it starts getting a black color. So whatever it was, Allah's Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said you will see fitnatul ahlas, the fitna of the saddle bags. Saddle, what you call it? The saddle mats. So a Sahabi radiallahu anh immediately asked, وَمَا fitnatul ahlas? That what is such a fitna? That a saddle mat. So obviously Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam knew, he knows what a hils is, a saddle mat. He wasn't asking what's that. So he gave him some other explanation of what that fitna will entail. So he said, harab with the small ha, wa harab with the big ha. Harab with the small ha, and harab with the big ha. So everything in this narration was unique, the wording was unique. Harab with the small ha means running, and harab with the big ha means looting. So it will be a fitna of running and looting. So to explain this, when I was about 10 years old, that was 1990, that's when the Persian Gulf War, they call it the first Gulf War, took place. In the history of what we call the modern era, few wars featured the highest, which had an impact on the whole world and on particularly on the Muslim world. The first was what the world calls World War I and World War II. So although they gave it two names, it was called World War. So that is one war, World War. It was in World War that the entire Khilafat system was brought to the ground. And it was the first step for what they would call a new era. At that time, I don't think they even spoke about a new world order. But it was the beginning of what they saw as a new future, World War. The next time that the biggest, what they call coalition in world history was made was when the Persian Gulf War took place. So from World War, many years passed until 1990. 1990 was the next time where the biggest coalition of the world, to such an extent that Russia and America were enemies from the beginning. But when this Persian Gulf War was going to take place, both of them signed. This is very important. And the words of both presidents, one was I think Mikhail Gorbachev at that time, one was George Washington Bush, the first or senior, whatever they call him. And they were enemies in and out. But both of them had the same words for this war. Amongst their words was, I think it was George Bush when he mentioned about this war before it started. Something like this, he said that what's happening in the Persian region at the moment is very, very, it's a big problem. He says, but we have a hope that the result of it will be the beginning of a future of cooperation. The beginning of a future of cooperation. To understand that before this Gulf War took place, there was never ever non-Muslims allowed in the lands of Hijaz. It was when this Persian Gulf War took place that the hadith of أَخْرِجُ الْيَهُودَ مِنْ جَزِيرَةِ الْعَرَبِ came to an end. Meaning from the time of Umar radiallahu anh until this war, they were never ever allowed into the lands of Hijaz. When this war started, that was the beginning of that cooperation. America entered in this war like a master. So very quickly how this war took place, you had Iraq, which was making war with Iran for many years, maybe 10 years or whatever it was. And then Kuwait suddenly decided to put up their price of oil, and Iraq warned them, don't do this, because they felt then their economy will be knocked. That's how the world says it. Saddam Hussein, if you ask him what happened, he will say a different story. He said, yeah, America told me to make war. That's how he'll say it. And his people will say the night before America attacked, even that night he and the American president were speaking on the phone. So he was shocked, like, yesterday I spoke to him on the phone, he told me nothing. And the next day his army came. So Iraq had American weapons. When Iraq was fighting Iran for about 10 years, America was the one supplying Iraq with weapons. So they had American weapons. For whatever reason, he entered into Kuwait. When his army, whether it's who knows who counted, but they say about 100,000 soldiers entered into Kuwait. When they entered into Kuwait, it was written at that time that this was the most unique war, that the entire Kuwaiti military just ran. There was no war. There was no fight. So if you wanted to look for a word of harab, that was the best word. They just ran. Harab. And as soon as they ran, then harab took place. Open looting, because now an army of 100,000 is in the land of Kuwait. And everything is yours. The oil is yours, the house, because there's no one there. Everyone's gone. The women were just putting their clothes and their buckets on their head, and everyone was just running, because the army ran. So harabun wa harab, running and looting. So they entered in 1990, perhaps in about November, December, I can't remember. And then immediately the whole world got together like anything, as though they were waiting for it from long, they prepared for it. Because they made decisions faster than South Africa government could make to stop the looting. How well it was, whole world immediately. Whole world was brought, as though they were ready for it. So it was a few months later where America, but it wasn't just America, the whole world was going to change. Because the deals were already gone through. Saudi was going to do things which they had never done from the time of Umar radiallahu anh. Americans were going to be allowed into Hijaz. They were going to pay them a certain amount, which I understand up till today they're still paying them. They haven't finished paying them. So that was, as soon as the American forces entered, that was the second most unique war. Because that war took place in about 4 days. In 4 days, the entire Iraqi military then turned and they started running. So it was the second harab. And why that was also called a unique harab is as they ran, the Iraqi military was running, meaning going back to Iraq. American forces was ordered to bomb them. Normally you don't ever bomb retreating soldiers. They were supposed to get, so it was called, that highway is known up till today as the highway of death. Those people never knew why they're being bombed, because we're retreating. So now you're supposed to say war over, but they never called for war over. So there was the second harab. And after they ran, then the big looting started. That looting was America's looting. Because from that day until today, they collecting from that war. Open looting. They made a deal with Saudi. And Saudi had and always has so much money that perhaps if they want to, they can pay America off in 1 year. But the deal was such that no, you must not pay us off in 1 year. So interest would always keep rising with that amount, and until today they're still paying for that war. They have never left Hijaz from that war. So it's a war that never stopped. Maybe that's one reason if you wanted to call this one, that this was fitnatul ahlas. It is a war or a fitna that's going to be stuck with you. After this war, they became, that's what he said at the beginning, which no one understood at that time. The beginning of a future of cooperation. That time no one thought what cooperation this would be. Cooperation. Harabun wa harab. Running and looting, both parties. Ran and looting. Then in the speech he said, it will be at the end of this war that we will see the start of the new world order. So at that time, 1990, no one even knew the word called new world order. But for some reason he knew this Gulf War will start a new world order. The beginning of a new world order. And then a nice word he said at the ending, he said it will be the beginning of the era where the world will be free from the threat of terror. So before this there was no terror. I don't know what terror he was talking about. Because before this Afghanistan were fighting Russia, so America had no fear. They were doing their work for him. And Iraq was fighting Iran, that was also for America. So what terror he was speaking about, but what a word he used. He said, and we will see the era where justice will prevail and the beginning of the era of world peace. Fitnatus sarra, world peace. He used that word world peace, and on the other side his biggest enemy, that Gorbachev, he gave his speech in Russia at that time to explain why he and America became friends for one day. So he said also, like, there's no reason why the two of us united in this war. He said, except that the result of it will be world peace. So both of them, I don't know why they used that word peace. But amazing how the narration went. Harabun wa harabun. It will be looting and it will be running and looting. Thumma fitnatus sarra. And then it will be the fitna of peace. Fitnatus sarra. So Ahlas, it is a war that never ended. Until today, that war of what is called the Persian Gulf War. Some said it ended when finally Saddam Hussein was removed about 10 years ago. Others have said it has not ended till today. That thing, and if you go there, you'll understand this war has not ended, the Iraqi war. So Luzum, Dawam, it will remain with the Shayateen. Never came out of the Arab lands, Luzum and Dawam. It was looting and running, looting and running and looting, running and looting. So it fits very well with the wording. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Dakhanuha tahta qadamay rajulin min ahli bayti yaz'umu annahu minni wa laysa minni." Dakhanuha tahta qadamay rajulin min ahli bayti يزعم أنه مني وليس مني إنما أوليائي المتقون. So this wording also is like a very mysterious or unique wording. Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the dakhan of this fitna. So the word dakhan, normally we know dukhan. Dukhan means smoke, ghubar, dust. So some normally would translate it as dakhanuha, means the instigator of this fitna. Because like how dust goes up. So you take the meaning of dakhan means ithara, the one who will start this fitna. He says, like how dust or smoke goes up, the one who starts this fitna will be a man min ahli bayti, from my family. Meaning the family of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was always known as either from the Hassan family or from the Hussein family. But the word dakhan comes, they say it's like a masdar of the word dakhina, because it's slightly different from dukhan. They say dakhinati nar. Dakhinati nar normally means that the fire was fed with, normally if you throw logs into the fire and it is like dry, you'll get a good fire. But when it is wet, you get a lot of smoke. You must try this and put some water or anything that is wet by fire, and you will see how the smoke comes out. So dakhinati nar means when a lot of smoke comes, when it is fed with wet logs and a lot of smoke. So whoever will understand what happened in Kuwait at that time is that now America came back in and the Iraqi forces had to turn and they had to run. One reason is whatever weapons they thought they got to fight now against America, they bought those weapons from America. So it's not going to work. So later on, when some would say that the jets were not taking off, meaning we're trying to put them on, they're not going on. So those jets were bombed. They never flew in the sky. That's why it was a 4-day war. There was no way they could go in the sky. And the other unique thing was wherever they had hidden jets, Saddam Hussein had a unique mind. So he had places built in the desert where it is only sand, and under the sand is your weapons. But wherever he hid his weapons, America was able to bomb, as though like they had ilham. So it's obvious if you sold the weapons, you're going to know where your weapons are. It must be having some chip or something, tracking device. Say shoot there, shoot there. So wherever there was weapons, they bombed. They knew where all his jets were, and without the jets, he could not manage to send a single jet. Few they did send, but it was hardly anything. So America, with the air power, within 4 days, were able to completely wipe out this powerful Iraqi army. They ran, and they attacked them in Iraq. And that was the beginning of their entire destruction. One person at that time wrote, had Saddam Hussein in his stupidity not decided to go for Kuwait, Iraq would have been the most wealthiest country in the world. After 10 years with the war with Iran. But Taqdeer was Taqdeer, and he was brought into the war. That's why I was saying that. So Dakhan. So after his soldiers had to run, he also now, he was very sharp. So he understood that what a liar these people are. They made me go into this war. So before his troops left, he told them to put light to the Kuwaiti oil fields. So you all won't know that because you all were not born perhaps. But the world at that time understood one of the biggest fires that the world saw. Because you can't put off a fire that's burning on oil. So that, and then they blamed him after that for Lord. They said the amount of pollution he caused in the world. They like that word, so much of air pollution. Rather than air pollution, they were burning in their hearts. So much of oil, there was no way they could put it off. He lit all those fields, the Kuwaiti oil fields, before they left. So when that thing was lit, it was seeing hardly fire, you were only seeing smoke. So if you want to look for dakhanuha, its smoke, then you would have seen on that time unique smoke. Its smoke will come tahta qadamay rajulin. Look at that wording. Its smoke will come from under the feet. So that under the feet, normally it's majaz you can use, like he instigated it. So he was responsible. And if you want to really look for a real meaning of it, you will see smoke coming from under the feet. Because it was under the feet. You have oil fields underground, not on top of your head. So its smoke will come from under the feet of a man, min ahli bayti, from my family. Because he was, that's why he's called Saddam Hussein. A man from my family. He was from the Husseini, or he claimed to be. يَزْعُمُ أَنَّهُ مِنِّي. He will claim to be from me. That's why Saddam Hussein. وَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. But he will not be from me. So one meaning is that although he will be of my lineage, and that's how it's normally explained, but he will not be like a pious man. Or at that time he will not be. Because for Saddam Hussein, we all, or many of us have the inclination now that at the end of his life he changed. For years he was an agent of America. He was an atheist. He had many great ulama killed. And when this first Gulf War took place and he realized who his real friends are and who his enemies, people who were close to him themselves wrote that after this war, the first one, till the second one, he began reading Quran. He had never read Quran before this. He said after that, the way he sponsored and looked after the widows of those whose husbands died in that first war, as though he took it like his responsibility. That is why when he died smiling. When he passed away, when they wanted to hang him, he smiled before he died. Normally a man will not smile. He gave a message to the leaders of the world, like, serve America and that's what they'll do to you. But he smiled at the ending. He defied them. Maybe they wanted to kill him because he burned that oil. Wasn't supposed to do that. So he changed. So whether he was from the Husseini clan or not, we'll never know. يَزْعُمُ أَنَّهُ مِنِّي. He will claim to be from me, وَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. But he will not be from me. So some have said that he will be this person, whoever this person. They never said it's Saddam Hussein. This is just one possibility. But one unique thing happened with Saddam Hussein, which I don't think happened with anybody else in history. That he was amongst those individuals whose name was put in the list of being from the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in 2003, when America took over, meaning when Saddam Hussein was finally removed, it was about 2 days or 3 days after America took over, that a special council was formed. They called it the Ashraf Council. It was there years ago, and they said the Turks then brought an end to it, and it was reformed, whatever it was. Don't know whether it's good council or bad council. They say a collection of Sunni and Shi'i, who knows what it was. But the first work that this council did was to say that the story of Saddam Hussein being from the Husseini family is incorrect. And he was perhaps one of those people in history, maybe the only one, I don't know, whose name was put in, and then they removed his name. His name was removed to show that lineage doesn't link up. And whoever thought it's correct, they made a mistake or they were forced. Otherwise, the proof of his lineage, they looked at it and they said, see, it doesn't link. So he's one of the few in history who was scratched out from. So if you look at that wording, يَزْعُمُ أَنَّهُ مِنِّي, he will make a claim to be from me, وَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. But later on, when you will see in 2003, you will find out, hey, he wasn't from me. Who knows, like whether it was regarding him or not. إِنَّمَا أَوْلِيَائِي الْمُتَّقُونَ. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said then, those that are close to me or my family are really those that fear Allah. So whatever it was, but even that part I found it fitted very nicely for that individual. You are unique in history. You can go in the Guinness book. The only man who was taken out of the lineage. Hardly you get a man like that. So they pulled him out. It was featured in all newspapers at that time. That Saddam Hussein's name has been taken out from the lineage of the Husseinis. They pulled him out. Who knows whether it was. But this Kuwaiti Gulf War was one war after World War. The biggest coalition was brought of the world, meaning coalition, world countries, Arab, Muslim and non-Muslim. In the non-Muslim, friend and foe. Everyone joined in this war. No one knew like what we're getting out of it, but as a command came from on top. Someone who's the boss of both Gorbachev and Bush. Because Bush and Gorbachev could never see eye to eye. But if they got one boss who's more stronger than both of them, he must have told, like the two sons were always fighting. Because remember, Russia and America's war was a very old war. A very old war. But like one boss above them told, you shut up the two of you, sit today and sign quickly. It's one of the fastest documents that were signed. That both of us agree on the benefit of this war. Two worst of enemies. They also agreed. And how the Arabs agreed with America, just like that, suddenly. It was one of the most unique and the fastest things that the world had seen. But how he said, like Ilham, he said, that what's happening in the Persian War will open up an era of future cooperation. How he knew, like, we will now cooperate with the Arab world. How they cooperated up till today. Because of that, we are like, have an inclination that this fitnatul ahlas, to a great extent, could have referred to the beginning of the first Persian War, the Gulf War. It could have been something else also. But we found this one fits very nicely with it. Harabun wa harabun thumma fitnatus sarrah. Another scholar, he explains sarra. He said, I'm not looking at it from the word of sarra yasurru, but from sirrun. And sirrun means then the era of, like what they call nowadays in English, espionage, like that secrecy. And now there was always that in the world. It started maybe in 1960s or something, where they were able to like check up what you're saying. But it wasn't in the Arab world, because these people could never get in the Arab world. But when this Iraqi war took place, that's the first time that when America and these countries entered into the into Hijaz, it is the first time that everything of Hijaz was now known by somebody else. It was the era where every secret of the Muslims was now open for somebody. So he said then the era of, so he translated it, another scholar as, the era where sir, a lot of things which are quiet will now be known. Meaning you will be taped, you will be heard. What you are talking about, somebody else will know. Because there's somebody else behind you in your own government. Until that day, there was no American forces in the lands of Hijaz, forget in Makkah Mukarramah. أخرجوا اليهود والنصارى من جزيرة العرب. They were not allowed even into Hijaz. So at that time when America allowed them to come, then that's why you'll see, nowadays I don't even dare anymore. But at that time it was Makkah and Medina Munawwara that they had to write there that only for Muslims. The reason is because everywhere else now non-Muslims could move freely. There were bases set up for them. And when you had to invite America, then at that time the Arab world just kept quiet, or maybe there was no WhatsApps and YouTubes to take pictures of it. But because they invited American soldiers said, we come, but we need our drink, we need our woman. And they stayed there for years, still there. And whatever they required was provided to them. Whatever they required. So at that time the law changed. They said Muslims can't go to certain places in Hijaz. Certain places were closed. Because if a Muslim had to go there, he would see so much of fitan taking place, which before that had never entered the lands of Hijaz. So the beginning, the Kuwaiti Gulf War. So that already took about half an hour. So now we'll stop there. Inshallah, in the future we'll go to the next fitna. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.